Hello students, let's start chapter number 6, life processes, and our today's topic is respiration. So what is respiration? The process of deriving energy from the food inside the cells is known as respiration. Before going into further details, let's perform a simple activity. Take 2 test tubes and put some lime water inside these test tubes. In one of the test tube, we will add or pump in air using a syringe, and we will notice how much time this lime water takes to turn milky. As lime water turns milky when it reacts with carbon dioxide present in the air. So now we will note the time taken. And in the second test tube, we will exhale the air. So, when our exhaled air passes over the lime water, it starts turning milky at a rapid rate as compared to the other test tube. So, this shows that the concentration of carbon dioxide is more in the exhaled air as compared to the air outside. So that's why this lime water turns milky faster as compared to the other test tube. So it means carbon dioxide is released during our exhalation. Respiration is of 2 types, aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration occurs in the presence of oxygen and it occurs inside the mitochondria. Mitochondria are the cell organelles which are found inside the cells, and these organelles are known as powerhouse of the cell because they produce power in the process of respiration. And during aerobic respiration, more energy is produced and end products are carbon dioxide and water. In anaerobic respiration, oxygen is not involved and it doesn't occur in mitochondria, and energy is produced in lesser amounts as compared to that of aerobic respiration. End products may be lactic acid or ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide. So these are 2 types of respirations. Now let's have a look at the possible pathways by which the glucose molecules can break down. Glucose is a 6-carbon compound. In cytoplasm, it gets broken down into pyruvate molecule or pyruvic acid. Glucose is a 6-carbon compound. So when it gets broken down into pyruvate, it produces 2 molecules of pyruvate, and along with that energy is produced. So glucose breaks into pyruvate. This pyruvate can further break down in 3 ways. Usually in the presence of oxygen inside the mitochondria, it performs the aerobic respiration and gets broken down into carbon dioxide, water and energy. So in aerobic respiration, pyruvic acid molecule produces carbon dioxide, water and energy, but when we are doing strenuous exercise and sufficient oxygen is not available to our muscle cells, then even in the lack of oxygen, it breaks down further into lactic acid and energy is produced. But as compared to aerobic respiration, less energy is produced here. Similarly, in the absence of oxygen in yeast cells, this pyruvate gets broken down into ethanol, a 2-carbon compound, and a carbon dioxide molecule is produced and energy is produced. So, energy is produced in all the possible pathways of breaking down of glucose molecule. This energy is produced in the form of ATP molecules. ATP means adenosine triphosphate. So what happens? Adenosine diphosphate molecule, which is known as ADP, it combines and forms a rich bond, energy rich bond with phosphate and synthesizes ATP. Now let's discuss respiration in unicellular organisms like amoeba is there, paramecium, chlamydomona, some bacteria, euglena, all these single-celled organisms are visible in this diagram. So by the journal body surface, exchange of gases occurs in unicellular organisms. So what happens? Oxygen is present in the air, and these oxygen and carbon dioxide travel along the concentration gradient. For example, oxygen has high concentration outside, so it moves inside the cell where its concentration is less. Similarly, carbon dioxide is produced inside the cells, so along the concentration gradient, this carbon dioxide moves out. So this is how gaseous exchange occurs in unicellular organisms through their journal body surface or through their cell membranes. So no special organ system is required. Now let's discuss gaseous exchange in plants. Plants take up oxygen using specialized cells which are known as stomata. These stomata are open during day and gaseous exchange occurs during day. At night, the stomata are closed. So what happens? During daytime, photosynthesis occurs, and as a result of photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is used and oxygen is produced. This oxygen is released out through the stomatal apertures. So oxygen moves out. During night time, photosynthesis stops and no gaseous exchange occurs during night time. So carbon dioxide may be removed. So this way stomatal apparatus helps in gaseous exchange. Other than stomata, lenticels may also help in the gaseous exchange. Tree trunk has some ruptured spaces here. So these cracks or ruptured areas are known as lenticels. Inside these lenticels, loosely placed cells or loosely packed cells are present. So through these loosely placed cells, gaseous exchange occurs. Now, how respiration occurs in animals? All multicellular organisms need specialized organ system for respiration called respiratory system, and every respiratory system should have a respiratory surface having some desired characteristics, and these desired characteristics include, first point is respiratory surface should be thin and fine. And if it is lined by single layered epithelial tissue, then it is far better. So thin and fine. Second point is respiratory surface should have high vascular supply. So it should be highly vascular. Third point is respiratory surface should have large surface area. More the surface area, more will be the rate of absorption of gases. So large surface area. And fourth point is respiratory surface should be moist. So these are the 4 desirable characteristics which should be present in a good respiratory surface. It should be thin and fine, should be highly vascular, should have large surface area, and should be moist. Let's discuss respiration in fish. Fish is an aquatic organism. It cannot consume the air from, it cannot consume oxygen from air. So it consumes oxygen dissolved in water. It consumes oxygen dissolved in water. So what happens? Water enters through the mouth, and this water has high concentration of oxygen in it. After entering into the mouth, it is then sent to the gill chambers, and through a flap known as operculum, it moves out. Gill plates are visible here. So when this water moves over the gill plates, what happens? The gaseous exchange occurs here in the gill plates. So gill plates are highly vascular. Blood is flowing inside. So this blood takes oxygen from the incoming water currents. So oxygen is then taken up by the blood flowing inside the gill plates, and the carbon dioxide produced inside the body is given to the water, and outgoing currents of water take out this carbon dioxide. So this way aquatic organisms, they respire, take up oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide. But as they consume the oxygen dissolved in water, and as compared to the air, the amount of oxygen dissolved in water is always less. So these aquatic organisms, they need to breathe very fast. So their breathing rate is very high as compared to the breathing rate of terrestrial organisms, because the amount of oxygen is always less in the water as compared to the amount of oxygen in air. So such organisms, they have high breathing rate. Breathing rate is always high in aquatic organisms like fish. Now let's discuss respiration in human beings. Human beings have a proper system for respiration, which is known as a respiratory system, and this system looks like this. It starts from a pair of nostrils, and nostrils lead to the nasal passage. Nasal passage receives the air, and this nasal passage has hair inside it, small hair. So several hair are present which filter the incoming air. Along with that, the nasal passage is lined with mucus. So this is a sticky covering over the nasal passage. So whatever microbes or pathogens enter inside with incoming air, they stick with the mucus. So comparatively cleaner air moves inside. From nostril to nasal passage, this air moves to the pharynx, and then through larynx it enters the trachea. This trachea has C-shaped cartilaginous rings over it. We can see the C-shaped cartilaginous rings which help and ensure that this air passage never gets collapsed. So from the trachea, this passage then branches further into bronchus, left bronchus, right bronchus, which further branches into bronchioles, and then further branching occurs to alveolar ducts, and finally it reaches up to and ends up with the sac-like or balloon-like structures which are known as alveolar sacs or alveoli. Singular is alveolus, plural is alveoli. So air enters inside the alveolar sacs. But air enters by the process of breathing. Rib cage expands and is lifted up. Muscles of the diaphragm contract and diaphragm moves down. So when rib cage expands and is lifted upside, diaphragm contracts and moves outside. So what happens? The volume of thoracic cavity or chest cavity increases here. As the volume increasing here, the pressure decreases. With decrease in pressure inside the thoracic volume, air from outer side rushes inside. So air has high pressure outside. So this air rushes inside from high pressure to low pressure area. So this way inhalation occurs. But during exhalation, what happens? Diaphragm relaxes and moves up. rib cage contracts and moves down. So this way volume of the thoracic cavity decreases. With decrease in volume, the pressure increases. So when pressure increases on the air, what happens? This air start moving from the region of high pressure to low pressure. So this way air moves outside. This is known as exhalation. So during inhalation air moves inside, during exhalation air moves outside. So breathing is a physical process in which inward and outward movement of air occurs. But even during exhalation, all air doesn't move out. Some residual air is always left inside, which ensures that sufficient time is given for the gaseous exchange inside. Now, air from the nostrils to nasal passage, to larynx, to trachea, to bronchus, to bronchioles, to alveolar ducts, then to alveolar sacs, it reaches into the alveolar sacs. So what happens in the alveolar sacs? This is the enlarged portion of the alveolar sac, as we can see from this picture. These alveolar sacs are highly vascular. They have large surface area. They are very thin, lined with single layer epithelial tissue, and they are moist. So when air enters inside, gaseous exchange occurs inside. So from the respiratory bronchioles, air enters into the alveolar ducts and then into the alveoli where gaseous exchange occurs. How gaseous exchange occurs? Let's have a look at another diagram. So air enters inside this alveolar sac and it has blood capillaries around it. A network of blood capillaries is there around the alveolar sac. And what happens when the blood enters into the blood capillaries? It has high concentration of carbon dioxide. So the concentration of carbon dioxide and oxygen is different in the blood and in the alveolar sac. So when blood carries carbon dioxide, the concentration of carbon dioxide is low inside the alveolar sac. So carbon dioxide from the blood moves into the alveolar sac and oxygen moves inside the blood because the concentration of oxygen is more inside the alveolar sac as compared to that in the blood. So this way deoxygenated blood, after giving carbon dioxide to the alveolar sacs and taking up oxygen, gets oxygenated and purified. Then this blood from the lungs is given to the heart for pumping to the different organs. And one thing more, a pigment also helps in the exchange of gases, that is known as hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is present in the RBCs. When it combines with oxygen, it forms oxyhemoglobin. And hemoglobin has high affinity to combine with oxygen and to form oxyhemoglobin. So this way hemoglobin helps in carrying the oxygen from alveolar sacs to other body parts. And hemoglobin, when combines with carbon dioxide, forms carbaminohemoglobin. But as compared to the oxygen, hemoglobin has less affinity to combine with carbon dioxide. So most of the carbon dioxide is transported in dissolved form in blood plasma. So after gaseous exchange, deoxygenated blood gets oxygenated and then carries this oxygen to the body tissues. Inside the body tissues, respiration occurs. So this is all about respiration in plants and animals. Thank you so much. See you all in next video.